A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Natural Medicine. Should I boost? Today's guest thinks yes, but right. I'll talk about the booster topic in a moment with neuroscientist Josua Kohberg. Stay tuned. Hello Josua, a warm welcome. Hello Rolf. Well, a topic that's on everyone's lips and ears and the media. Booster. What do you mean by right booster? I mean that it makes perfect sense to boost. But if you want to boost, you should boost your immune system. And there are really great, exciting ways to really boost your immune system. And I think we can come up with some great suggestions today. Great, I'm all ears. The immune system is always an issue. Now, in the current time, it also played a very important role. We're talking about the immune system in general. What is the immune system? How do I take care of it? We're thinking about food, exercise. What possibilities do you see there? Well, in fact, there are many possibilities. What you just mentioned, of course, nutrition, of course, regular exercise, and I'd like to go to a more profound or underlying system, which is personal mood. That means if I make sure I'm in a good mood, I've automatically turned on this immune system booster. When people live in harmony, are at peace with themselves, are clear about where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and if they do this every day, ideally as hygiene measures, then we have a proven, measurable effect on our immune system. And the fascinating thing is, I'm a neuroscientist, not a doctor, who would now speak from a medical point of view. So I always speak out of the idea, what does our brain do with information? And if I know, for example, what fears do to our brain, what worries about the future do to our brain, then I know what ultimately happens to our nervous system via the brain reaction, and then what happens via our nervous system to our immune system. And that's my idea, to show how I can boost my immune system, namely from a completely different side. Yeah, that's exciting, because superficially we're really thinking about the obvious things that we always hear and can do. But probably when I listen to you, no matter how good I eat, no matter how much I exercise, if something is fundamentally wrong in me, I can't do my mental hygiene. Or I'm under pressure in some way, I'm just not happy. Yeah, I'll say it very simply and boldly. Then these are not good conditions for the immune system. And what kind of approach do you have to feel it out at all? Where could something be in trouble? Or where is potential for optimization? So there's a very exciting concept. I'll go with a statement that most of us are familiar with. From our Christian culture, we know this statement that Jesus once said, "Become like the children." And when you look at what exactly a child does or doesn't do, it gets interesting, because a child is an acceptance. So a child simply accepts the moment, just as the moment is now. And a child is also very value-free. For example, if I now take 10 children, age 2, from different nations with different skin colours, then I can put everyone in a playground and they wouldn't judge each other. If I do this with 10-year-olds, there's already a rating. If I do that with 20-year-olds, it's much more drastic, and with 30-year-olds, they watch which car does the person drive and so on. So that means we then have such strange evaluation routines that we believe that they make us happy or unhappy, that they make us healthy or unhealthy, or whatever. And actually regaining that status, living value-free in acceptance, in the moment, is, from my point of view, really, just from a neuroscientific point of view, the absolute immune booster, because at that moment I'm able to regulate my system. That means my cerebral hemispheres work together in a very, very integrated way. I have relaxation frequencies, theta, alpha in the brain. This in turn has an immediate effect on the vegetative nervous system, and when that's in balance, and I, let's say, nevertheless have any physical ailments or problems, they are immediately relieved. This is all scientific fact. I can understand how such an inner attitude works. The problem for us as adults is that we try to get into this inner attitude through conscious routines. We then start thinking and doing coaching and reading books. And then it gets worse with every book. Because every book recommends something that I could do now, then I can't do it again, and then I feel even worse. So it's a kind of vicious circle sometimes. In other words, the spiral is actually getting tighter and tighter. Then we're influenced from the outside with fears and so on. And the opposite of the vicious circle would actually be an angelic or virtuous circle, a circle that keeps growing. And that works by becoming like a child. The whole thing is very simple. Become like children. And that's when Grönemeyer's song comes to mind, Power to the Children. Then things changed in the world, especially in terms of evaluation and judgment. But how do I become a child? So me, all of us, we were once children. We can remember, stronger or less strong. A lot of things were maybe driven out of us, or we were domesticated, adapted to the system, which basically just works like that. But how can I get my own mental hygiene back on track in this regard? On the one hand, take myself out of the system and still remain part of the system. It's part of the game. Yeah, exactly. How can I become a child again? Or change the direction of my consciousness a bit? And so, from my perspective, a very, very simple method. We've already made a show about what our voice says about us. And the easiest method of all, from my point of view, is to just find yourself in a tone for 10 to 12 minutes once a day. It's a very old Indian method called mantra. We've optimized it a bit technically. With this, you have the opportunity to find your own bass tone via an app. And the tone that is at the center of one's character, one's personality. And if I actively tone with this tone once a day for 10 to 12 minutes, something wonderful happens. It takes a few days, a few weeks, sometimes maybe 2 or 3 months. But we come out of exactly these evaluation loops, and we come into acceptance in the present moment. And that's the real power we have as humans. I'd like to clarify it with a picture. When a person's under pressure, when they have fears, when they have worries, then a stimulus comes from the outside, and the reaction immediately follows the stimulus. And that's not actually human, it's a brainstem response. So that means I hold a treat in front of my dog's nose, and then the salivation starts, and we have that as humans in almost all areas. That means they give us news on TV, and boom, I'm scared. And immediately my system is in turmoil. My immune system goes down when I'm scared. For example, being human, so being consciously human, means there comes a stimulus. Then there's a short pause, the moment when I make the decision what to do now, and then I don't react, but then I can act. So that means I can decide. The message comes, am I scared? Pizza's coming. Am I salivating? Or a car drives by, do I feel bad or good? That little moment, that's what I always call that gap of freedom. And with this active toning of one's own bass tone, one goes straight into this exercise. You then sound a certain mantra. This goes over the navel, heart, forehead, middle, and then you exhale while toning. And then you have a little moment where you don't breathe and you don't think. ideally. And that's this little gap of freedom. And it's getting stronger and bigger every day. And this freedom that we gain there, it gives us the opportunity to make free decisions. I can still decide that I want to be afraid, that's my right. I can also decide that I want to be happy. I can also decide that I want to be sad because someone's passed away. It doesn't change my feelings, it just decides. There comes a stimulus, I have a moment, and then I take action. And that's immune boosting. And then I may, or hopefully, make a different decision than how I would decide or not decide at all, but as a reflex. I would simply react to the conditioning. So when I realise that I've taken care of it now, for example, I personally keep the news away from me, and I still always know what I need to know. And the weather, that's what I see outside, depending on what you have to plan for. But you increase the scope for action. And this gap of freedom, if you let it get bigger and bigger, like this, you get rid of this conditioning. And that is the piece of freedom that I get through this process. And then make a conscious decision and not just react briskly. Exactly. And the interesting thing about it is that when we have extremely ill-considered reactions, they're extremely valuable, such reaction possibilities. So if, for example, a car drives towards me and I'm sitting in my car, then of course, I'd like to reflexively turn my steering wheel. It's logical. So when it comes to life and death, it's all fine. But, for example, when fears are generated and I'm stuck in a permanent loop, then my hormone balance changes. So let's just take the topic of fear, which has somehow been very omnipresent now in the last 1.5 or 2 years. It's getting worse, and this topic is changing my hormonal balance. I have a constant adrenaline rush, and with that rush it's just a biochemical process, but I weaken my immune system because I no longer make conscious decisions, but I go into this feeling of fear. When I sound, I go out, start to be myself again, to reflect, and eventually when I reflect, I'll find that 99% of things aren't even real to me. And that doesn't mean that natural disasters and such, that none of it's real, but right now, as I'm sitting here, a plane crash doesn't seem real to me because we're not on a plane. Why should I be afraid of a plane crash? And it accompanies a lot of people who have fears that aren't real all the time and actually are damaging their immune system. Although we are not affected or something like that is imminent. So that means if I have my own strategy and distance myself from these fears in this way, I can rebuild my immune system. Or if it's already in good condition, just keep it more in good, in even better condition, and live healthy. Exactly. Well, that's also something that's probably going to be instrumentalized in many ways in family structures, in business, subtle conveying of fears in order to then be able to control someone. But that's necessary. Nobody will take that away from us. So we have to wake up ourselves and develop our own strategy. Yeah, so, well, we support it a bit. There are sort of routines that are relatively easy to install. So this topic is always omnipresent for me. How do I get routines into some things? And you can simply say that our brainstem reacts to playful stimuli, for example. That's an advantage of Facebook, of Instagram, and what all those things are called. You scroll and scroll and scroll, and then 20 minutes are gone. You didn't even notice how you spent your lifetime there. We use that, for example, from a neuroscientific point of view, with our products too. We have a playful effect. We remind you with push messages, have have you toned today? Get a point again for toning, check your progress, and so on. We do that too, but we use it in terms of constructive processing and not in a destructive way. And that's why you can say that if someone starts every day with such simple exercises, for example, with this sounding, then of course they start making better and better decisions. Always more constructive again, more constructive again. To stay on the topic of the immune system, we have, for example, with a doctor that many viewers will probably know, Dr. Rüdiger Dahlke. We developed an immune booster coaching with him. Now the requirement is to sound first, and when I've done that, and I've decided, I want to live in harmony, I want to strengthen my immune system, then, of course, Rüdiger Dahlke comes along and explains to me for 8 weeks what simple methods I can use to strengthen my immune system, trying to just get 10 minutes a day in the sun, to up vitamin D, walking barefoot on rock to get electron exchange. These are all very simple things, and you don't have to do them all. But he gives you a boost every week, every 8 weeks that boosts your immune system. And I decide that out of my inner harmony, then I take these, and if I only take 3 or 4 of these things, I can measure how my immune system changes. So we have, for example, only the tones. We can prove this with everybody using HRV measurements, because the body I'm sitting with here is a measuring instrument. Depending on how I treat it, I can measure certain things, blood values or heart rate variability, whatever. And so I can understand how I'm actually set up in regards to the immune system, and all that without injections. Well, as an athlete, for example, I know a lot of equipment is designed to determine heart rate variability. And there are also apps that give such feedback. So I can already learn a lot about my condition there. Exactly. And something else came to mind. With what I'm exposed to every day, so media, news and so on, that just happens. I don't have much of a choice there. I can close my mind to that, as I mentioned earlier. But to practice such a system, that's where I make my first fundamental decision. And from then on, I make my own decisions again and again. I'm not determined by others. That's it. That's actually the real power that it's all about. If you're in tune with yourself, I'll stretch the bow even further. A person who's really centered in themselves can listen to all the news they want to listen to. They'll sit there valueless. So they'll listen to this and will even be able to just let it run without affecting their brain activity. And that's exciting because there's no fear that could dock. I would almost call it such a slight state of enlightenment. Enlightenment is always a kind of ruminated term, but if I look at it from a neuroscientific or scientific point of view, then enlightenment means the system is becoming more and more permeable. In the ideal case, that means that if one were enlightened, then no longer sit here with their body, but then they are in other spheres, then they no longer have to be here. And that is, everything would flow through them. The less it docks with me, the more freedom I have. Then externally supplied information no longer reaches me, and I decide what to do with it. The more enlightened I am, the more permeable I become. And it's a wonderful state. That means suddenly you can sit there, look at it, you can ask yourself, is it all real? Maybe it's not that real after all. How do I want to react today? It's like when you have a menu. So you sit down and say, would I rather eat pasta or salad, or would I rather eat a pizza? This is a completely free decision. Imagine if we could deal with everything that comes from the outside like this. Our partner is in imbalance, annoys us, and we could decide, do I react to that? Do I step in? Or maybe I just want harmony in our relationship and don't get on it. And that's exciting, especially with such stimulus-response stories. The question's always, how big is the gap? I have another word, now in the context of enlightenment, and how you described it so beautifully. I don't let that get to me anymore, it doesn't do anything to me anymore. Immunisation would actually go well with the common vocabulary of our topic with the boosters. I become immune to it, so that's an immunisation on a mental and emotional level. And the boosters are already taking place when I make the decision to take the initiative again and let my freedom grow through conscious decisions, and I no longer react to these reflexes. That's a really huge point that you just mentioned, and I scientifically can't explain it in a well-founded way because there is really little material on it. I may be able to offer a personal opinion on this that absolutely supports what you just said. So there are ideas, in academic work too, there are ideas that show that we activate bodies on several levels, or influence them destructively. And for example, in many philosophies, including the Indian philosophy, we assume that we have several subtle bodies. And I've been to India several times. I've seen incredible things. For example, that healers can change something in a subtle body, and you saw the effects in the human body immediately. So very exciting things. So I'm totally with you. The most effective immune booster, the immune booster for mind and soul, is completely free of side effects, and it will manifest on the physical level. Wow. Yeah, I think we're heading in the right direction, and it's worth, if you devote yourself to it and deal with it more closely, because I believe that every single person can really do something good for themselves. It doesn't matter what's around, what beliefs they have, even towards physical measures and so on, but simply as a service to themselves and to their soul. Where can we get more information? I say, well, the easiest way is really to use our app. It's free of charge and no strings attached. All information is available on Voice. It sounds like voice in English, but it's spelled W-O-O-Y-C-E, so voice.com. There are also links where you can download the app for free. You can make your bass tone determination free of charge, and you even get a little insight into your character. All free, because we want everyone to know their bass tone. And then you can actually start working with your tone right away, day after day if you want to. Well, thank you very much, dear Josua, for this wonderful conversation and the valuable input you gave us. My pleasure. Well, dear viewers, there isn't much more that can be said about it. I just ask you the question now. Have you worked out your own booster strategy yet? Further information and contact details for our guests can be found on our homepage. Thank you for your interest, and check back with us soon. See you soon. I wish you all the best.